Hi, thanks for tuning in. This is the US Futures Weekly Chart Analysis for the week ending 1st of November 2024. The first chart is the US Dollar Index Futures. This is the wider view. You can see that price has continued to trade roughly sideways for an extended period of time. And at the moment, price is pretty much right in the middle of the range. If we move in a little bit closer, you can see that price traded within the previous bar's range for most of the week on an increase in volume. The market has stalled just at this level here. If we put in some lines, you had a low form down here. Here was the next level above that, which lasted to about there. There was a period where there was a little bit of a vacuum in supply through here. Prices moved up to the highs of this little range here. I expect there will be further supply drawn out if price attempts to continue right up here. And the market's effectively absorbing supply right at this level now. And the increase in volume suggests that supply is being drawn out. So we'll see how the market contends with that and whether it can negotiate a path higher or whether the supply that's being drawn out will force price back down, or at least to continue trading sideways. This is the E-mini S&P 500 index futures. You can see the price broke out. There was a little gap left just here, which has been filled this week. Price has effectively been just floating higher on a lack of supply more recently, and this week has just pulled back. Once again, on low volume, the market's not really showing much intent, and it's just sitting up there at the highs of the range without a great deal of supply being drawn out, but without a great deal of demand being shown either. I expect that's partly due to the build-up towards the US elections, which are causing some uncertainty across many markets, and that should be resolved this week. US Treasury 10-year note futures continued to push lower this week. The market has been looking quite strong up here, and it even held on quite well initially. There was a period here where the market attempted to consolidate, but that failed 2 weeks ago, and prices continued lower this week. And the market's closed where support was found on this little push higher in the background. Volume increased this week. We'll have to watch for the response to see if there was any hidden buying support in there. At this point, it's showing you that there was increased selling pressure which forced the market lower. We'll just see what the response is next week and see whether there is going to be some support found at this level. Copper price futures. Copper price futures have been in consolidation mode in response to this push higher. Here was where the market broke out from. It pushed up to this level. The market was in consolidation for 3 weeks here and continues to trade sideways, probably just waiting for trading conditions to improve and become more favourable for an attempt to push higher. The low volumes and narrow spreads suggest that supply is not being drawn out, and in response, the market should be able to push higher once trading conditions become more favourable. It'll probably be up to the highs of the range. Gold price futures. Gold price futures saw supply drawn out the previous week here with a narrow spread and the increase in volume. Just put some lines in quickly. I suggested last week the market will likely come back and test for supply. It didn't do that. Effectively, it was too strong and attempted to continue higher, and all that's happened is further supply has been drawn out. Volume was increased, spread remained relatively narrow, price attempted to go higher and was forced back down by some selling pressure that was drawn out or continued to be drawn out. There is some chance the market will just continue to grind higher while supply is being drawn out and absorb that supply as price continues its trek higher. The more orthodox method would be to pull back modestly and absorb the supply in a test for supply, whether that looks like that or like this. It would be the narrow spread pullback to threaten any sellers to come out, absorb their supply, and then push higher in response. But this market does look quite strong. We've had 2 weeks where the market's pushed higher with narrow spreads, increased volume, but the market isn't intent on pulling back. So it may be that the market just continues to grind higher, absorbing the supply as it goes. So watch carefully, see how the market reacts. Silver price futures did come back in response to the supply drawn out last week, which is a more orthodox method. You can see price pushed higher, supply was drawn out. Down here, volume was increased and above average. The market did briefly attempt to push higher, but that quickly failed and prices pulled back in response to the supply being drawn out. Most likely, the response now will be some sort of consolidation here. There may be a test of this breakout line. We'll have to wait and see. If the market doesn't come back all the way to test this breakout line, that would be a sign of strength for the future. If it comes back, it leaves a gap before it reaches the breakout line and then pushes higher in response. That would be a sign of strength. It's too strong to come back and test the breakout for strength. But that remains to be seen. At this point, the market has pulled back in response to the supply drawn out 2 weeks ago, which is exactly what you'd normally see. Generally, you'll see a consolidation now. There may be a test of the breakout line for strength, and then the market will show its strength, I expect, and then continue, or at least attempt to, continue pushing higher. Light crude price futures. Light crude price futures are building a little low down here at the moment. Similar to the low over here in some respects. There was some demand in the market back here, and that found supply in this little zone here, which caught the market here and has forced it lower in response. And you can see by the shape of this week's bar with the longer tail, the close above mid-bar on below average volume. It was increased volume, but it remained below average. It suggests that selling pressure wasn't particularly strong this week, and the buyers actually gained the upper hand and closed the market well off its low. That suggests that there's at least an attempt to support the market here, and you may see a push higher in response. Only a modest push higher, but a push higher all the same. Euro US dollar currency futures had probably overshot towards the downside more recently. Down here in the background, you've got some highs were built here, a push higher in response over 2 bars. This was an absorption bar. Then there was the push higher in response. The market moved up and found new highs. They weren't able to maintain those highs though. Price broke down on this bar and have cascaded lower since. The market found some support this week. Volume suggests it wasn't strong support, and I expect this is probably showing you the market has overshot towards the downside, and this is probably where the market should have closed there, the lows of that bar. and that's where the market's pushed back to this week. So that's a more logical level. This was perhaps an overshoot towards the downside here. Just a little recovery this week. The volumes remain low in this market, and that suggests there's not a great deal of intent being shown. So it's trading mostly the inverse to the US dollar. British pound currency futures have shown that they're less inclined to push lower than the euro. This market made new highs up here, continued higher where the euro continued sideways at this level. Here was the lows of that range there, and the market has moved lower in response, but has been reluctant to do so. You've got the lows of the range sort of down here, like this. This market still hasn't reached that level. So it's showing relative strength. The market's closed pretty much adjacent to the lows of the previous bar. So there is some support being shown in the market. It's only modest. Volume remained below average. It was an increase in volume, but it still remained below average overall. So there wasn't a great deal of strength being shown. But it does appear that selling pressure has eased somewhat, and that's allowed some speculative buying support to move in. Japanese yen currency futures saw spread narrow considerably this week. You can see that price broke down here, pushed lower again. This week spreads narrowed, volume was reduced, well below the average, so it was more that selling pressure has eased rather than buying support come in. In fact, there's very little buying support I expect. It's mostly the fact that selling pressure has eased and the market has just seen very low volume come in, very low activity, and that's caused volatility to reduce and therefore spread to reduce. So you're not really seeing any great intent being shown here at all. You've just seen activity ease in the market and a low spread has been the result. It's probably best to wait and see just what this market does and see if any buying support comes in. Aussie dollar currency futures have also seen spread reduced this week. The lows of the range likely come through here. This market has yet to reach those lows. Spread narrowed this week. Volume was again pretty low. Activity is low. That means volatility is low or spread is low. Here's the lows of the push up here. So the market is free to consolidate in this area with relative ease, I expect. And that's pretty much what the market's done this week. There was no great intent being shown. Supply is low, but so is demand. So the market's just drifted lower on low volume. Bitcoin futures. Bitcoin attempted to break out this week. It did close low on the bar. It was a poor close, and back at these lines represent the previous all-time high, the highs of that range. This is the secondary breakdown. This is where the market attempted to consolidate initially, and prices attempted to break out this week. Volume was reduced and below the average, so there wasn't a great deal of intent being shown. The attempt to break out was in response to this little period of consolidation where the market has pushed higher on this bar, consolidated for a week, and it's attempted to float higher this week without a great deal of intent being shown. You can see that volume was well below the average. In fact, if we flip to the daily chart, you'll probably see the attempt to break out. Here was the attempt to break out here. The market did attempt to consolidate for a bar, but then saw some increased supply drawn out. And there wasn't enough demand in the market to absorb that supply, and that's pushed price lower. You can see down here that volume was increased on this bar here. This is supply being drawn out in response to the breakout. Perhaps some profit taking or maybe some short sales. There was an attempt to push higher in response to this breakdown, but that also failed and price closed just lower again on Friday. If we put in the highs of the range, they'll likely be this bar here, I imagine. And that's caught that push higher pretty close. The market's pushed up to the highs of the range. Here's the new all-time highs here. This is the highs of the range. And if you project that across, you can see the market pushed right up to that level this week before supply was drawn out and pushed price back down. Here's where we've been looking more recently. This was that push higher. This was a consolidation in response. We've had a secondary push higher up to the highs of the range. Prices pulled back. You'll probably see the market gather itself up here on top of this level and then make a secondary attempt to push higher if supply eases. Back to the weekly chart. You can see that makes some more sense now. Price pushed up to the highs of the range on the daily chart and has pulled back in response. It's effectively going to test this level for strength. You may get some daily bars that look like this. And then if supply is found to be low, a secondary attempt to push higher in response. Back to the US dollar index futures just quickly. You can see that market traded inside the previous bar's range for almost the entire week. The price is consolidating in here in this level. I do expect there'll be increased supply above, which will make a continued push higher a little more difficult. So we'll see how that goes. I think the most likely outcome, at least initially, is just for some early testing for supply like this early in the week, particularly with the US elections early in the week. And then we'll see what the response is once they've been resolved. Okay, thanks for your time. I'll see you again next week. Thank you. See ya.